Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another, hopefully, very exciting session of the Hearth Within. We are very, very glad to be doing this particular session today. It's called Guftagu Around the Hearth, and this is with five Red River poets. Five poets who have brought out their wonderful new books from Red River, and incidentally, all five of them again are women this time. And we have a very, very interesting collection and selection that we hope we will be bringing to all of you. So thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you to all the five poets who consented to be part of the panel. And thank you, of course, to Dibyajyoti Sharma of Red River for brilliantly bringing up works month after month, which is making an impact in the poetry scene in the country. So thank you very much, everyone. And the idea is to discuss, to celebrate, to talk about these wonderful books through the perspectives of the poets themselves and through the poems that they have brought into the world. So without much ado, I would like to begin the session by inviting Atreyee Majumdar. Atreyee is an academic. She is working at the National Law University. She's an associate professor in social sciences, and of course, she is a brilliant poet. Atreyee is here with her new book. It's called The Blue Book, and I invite Atreyee to introduce her book and to talk about it, and to read, of course. Atreyee, over to you.
Thank you, Vashudhara. This is the book. It's called The Book of Blue, and I'm very, very happy that this book has come out, thanks to Dibyo and his team. I'm used to giving academic presentations. This is the first time I'm giving a public presentation as a poet, so I'm a little bit confused, and I hope you'll forgive me. And I'll try to read. There are three sections in the book which are called Time, Restless, and Still, and I'll try to read two poems from each section. Let me say a little bit about the book because Vashudhara has requested us to do so, and we have a little bit of time. I started writing poetry seriously about 10 years ago, and this book collects some poems which date as far back as 2013, but not before that. And since 2018, I've started writing about religion, especially about my love for Krishna, or kind of the Krishna trope kind of pervades a lot of my poetic work. Also, my research work is on in Vrindavan, etc. But I was looking at the poems today to select the ones that I wanted to read, and I saw that the Krishna trope was repeating very, very often. And at the time that I put the poetry manuscript together, I didn't realize that it was that common, that recurrent trope. There are two other tropes that I want to point out in this book, which come out, at least to me. One is this thing of this world turning into other worlds. So the world that we live in constantly looks to me like it consists of other worlds. And this is a trope that's especially like time expands into other times, especially ancient and medieval times. And that kind of temporal expansion is very much present in some of the poems. And lastly, this kind of unmooredness. I have spent many years in the West and now back in Bangalore, and I continue to spend some time in Canada in the year, etc. The spatial unmooring is one more theme that catches some of my poems, that gets reflected on the page. And these three kind of time, spatial, kind of spread outness of spatial being, and finally love for the divine, and the Krishna trope kind of slips into even urban or modern tropes. So it's not like the Krishna trope is a ballad or an eulogy. Krishna slips into Bangalore and Bangalore slips into something else, and those kinds of things have happened in some of the poems. And lastly, I'd like to say that there are some Bangla poets who have influenced me right from when I was a kid, maybe 14 or 15 years old, especially Joy Goswami. And I now realize that several of his kind of tricks, not several, but a few of his tricks that I've kind of been able to catch on to, I try to replicate time and time again in my poems. With that, I'd like to read two from each of the three sections. The first poem is called Found. It is in the section that is called Time. found in a torn envelope of ripped out toenails, as if a birthday gift unopened, rotten with time but loved still in hiding, through the cracks of daylight and agile cats and pencil shavings in bookbinders, these webs of time, found in the folds of scarves and hairs, your dead toenail, shaved out in inches, is now a monument. The next one is called Pandemic. It's a bit of a long poem, but I guess it compensates for found being short. If you die, I will write a letter. I will write this letter bearing witness to all the letters I've written in vain, all the years that have passed in vain, all these diseases that have eaten into our souls. I prepare to write you now a final letter, a letter of letters. Pandemic times are horrible indeed. Lives are cheap, medicines expensive. The police beat up a man for going out to buy milk. Horror of news trickles into my phone 24/7 and I calculate the dead. They have now exceeded total number of my letters. Trade briefs from the Ministry of Commerce, health briefs from the Council of Distinguished Virologists, WhatsApp love from mothers and aunts. It all adds up into a massive percussion. My brain is pounding. I write you at this final moment, you are now dead. You cannot read me anymore. Worms are eating your ears in relish. You are now hop skipping into a different soul. Disease runs through my soul smoothly, destroying the last gasps of feeling. Numb is a number of the dead, a phone number. Numbers are voices in my head. You are dead. And I'm rejoicing. You are dead. And I'm writing to my diseased soul. You are dead. And I'm counting the nails of my fingers just to check if some are lost. One can't say in the pandemic times, Italy, Spain, Florida, I walk the earth counting fingernails, ensuring that the dead have the right number. You are dead. And I'm formatting my letter on word processor. This final letter, an ensemble of terrifying voices that only talk in numbers. You are dead, and I'm yet to die. This is the final number. 1-0, you lose, I win. Survival is my defeat. I have lived through the pandemic, waiting for you. The next one is from the section that's called Restless. It's called Love Poem. Petrol bombs like ripe oranges. In the hands of the men walking along the Death Valley, a red river passes along, calm as the poesy of Radha, forceful as the knightly love of Krishna. Petrol bombs like love diamonds, thrown with the beauteous force of miners of deep Africa. Nights lit up with diamonds, fires lit up like Diwali, corpses lay about like feasts of Thanksgiving, and guns like shit machines of gorgeous animals. It's a festival of blood, it's a festival of ripe oranges. I walk this alley of death, feasting on blood, feasting on human meat. February reveals its deep mystery. Bodies of the dead have come together in a pristine art form. The drains will be searched for the dead. The crevices of bird nests will be searched. The tandoor will be opened out. Ye aib ishq, ye gair ishq, this bitter love, this hateful love. My work is love. My name is love. I come here today to drink your blood and eat ripe oranges. I walk through the dead, besmirching my face with blood. The second one in this section is called Colony. Rocket science will save us from doom. Our new colonies dressed in our familiar hates. If tomorrow comes, I will grow you as bougainvillea in my balcony, as my colony, mine own, mine only. Maybe colonies are a strange form of love, territorial, complete. You are my prisoner, prisoner of desire. My art, my poems, my morning cigarette, all for you, but you won't speak. You don't get to speak. You get to blossom, you get to die. Mornings will come and melt eventually into sultry purple evenings, and you will scream inwardly, and that is my love. Complete, absolute. My territory, my rude obsession, my illiberal type of love. You will wilt eventually, and I will build a mausoleum for you. I will dress you in my poems, write you an epitaph. She who screamed in silence. And the last two are from the section that is called Still. The first one is called Purple Line. You get on the purple line and head back into your cove as the day breaks. The first train, the first hint of a pink horizon, and the first hour of a beggar's sleep by the railway lines mark your departure from the city that rises up to make money and kill hearts. The purple line runs straight into the universe, and you leave the tired city, having walked its alleyways the whole night, where you are shadow god, and we don't know who you are. We don't know your millennia of war. We don't know your statecraft. We don't know your love poems. We only see you walk about an urban Bedouin in a pinstriped bush shirt. We fight through the day about Marx and Lenin and wars of the day, price rise and heartbreak, strangers, gods, monsters alike. This city is our most favorite battleground. Solely for my poem, You Are Purple, a purple man in a pinstripe shirt, speeding out of a dead city, leaving me alone. The last one is called Lilac. In the name of the cowherd god, you turn pink at the tick of the clock. When cattle walk home, I take my phone out to square you onto an IG story. This story is interrupted time and time again by tentacles of this ugly city, people's bobbing heads and truck headlights. Bangalore grows into eternity and my taxi ride never ends. I square and square your lavender and it spills out of my frame. IG stories be damned. Damn you, lilac piece of sky, I say. You belong in my smartphone. You belong in my pink cocktail. You belong in my colorless heart. I need to grab you like Stan Granules in my 5 fingers. This ugly city shields you from private ownership. The cowherd sky refuses my phone, my wallet, my finger, my heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Atreyee. These were brilliant poems and very brilliantly read. One feels, the sense of rage that prompts them, because at some point of time, I think even grief becomes rage. So there is that very palpable sense of rage in these poems, and there's a lot of fragmentation. And as you say, the way that I perceive this, when you talk about place and where you talk about places collapsing into one another. So this spatial and temporal collapse is also, as you pointed out, very visible. And so in the next round, when we come to you with questions, I hope that we'll try to talk about these aspects of your poems. Thank you very much for that powerful reading. And from Atreyee's The Book of Blue, we move over to Mahua Sen, who is joining us from Hyderabad. So Mahua is a poet artist. She works in the corporate sector, and she's also a very well-known poet, editor. And we are very glad, Mahua, that you are here with your wonderful new book, Nostalgia, Crafting a Home Within. The very important words that link with one another here are, of course, nostalgia and home. And as I look at your book, I also see it is interspersed with several family photographs with pictures from your childhood. And these are pictures, I believe, which form a subtext to the poems, which are about family, which are about your place, which are about places in the mind, places you have left behind. So I would like to invite you to talk about your book, to talk about these poems, and to read from them. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Boshudhara. Thanks, Red River, and thanks, Jaideep Sarangi sir as well, for gifting us this beautiful, beautiful evening. I'm really blessed to be here today with you all. So yes, as you said, my book essentially talks about poetry. But before going into the book, I would like to discuss why poetry. So I believe that poetry is the compass, guiding us through the promenade of existence, as it connects us simultaneously with the world outside, as well as it takes us to those uncharted territories that lies deep within ourselves that perhaps we had not explored before. So poetry forces us to look deep down into our souls. It demands a massive amount of empathy, I believe, for others and for the surrounding milieu. And in the tapestry of life, poetry serves as the golden thread, as they say, that binds our collective experiences, our collective emotions and dreams. And my memory of, my association with poetry goes back in time when my grandmother introduced me to Abul Tabul by Shukumari. And I also remember Kaji Nazrul Islam's Lichu Chor, and then Rabindranath's The Child, which is a long, free verse poem in English. And I think it is his only poem originally written in English, which was, later translated in Bengali as Shishu Tirtho, which means the pilgrimage of the child. So this poem actually is about the journey of humankind through faithlessness onto faith and a new beginning. And it had a deep impact on me. And I believe, that the seed of poetry was sown back then into the soil of my soul, which germinated later in my school days as I went on to write half-baked poems, as they say, behind my notebooks. And yeah, the journey commenced from there. So coming to the book, as Boshudhara rightly pointed out, it is essentially about nostalgia, as the name suggests. And you can see the cover picture here. Can you see? Yeah. So this is the picture of my father's old clinic, which is deserted now. And plants have, grown from the crevices and the cracks, which is very symbolic of life peeking out from the bygone, So this house houses many of my childhood memories. So this book is about memory and how it shapes us, its paradoxes, its power, and it reminds us how we yearn for our youth, despite its privations and brutality. And it is a paradox that I believe too many of us face as we, ache for yesteryear in spite of the pain we had endured as a child. I had to, part with my biological parents at age 9. So there's a sense of place as well as a sense of displacement in my writing in general, not only in this book. Sense of home and homelessness. There's a, a sense of uprootedness, rootlessness, or even, the in-betweenness, the cusp and the dichotomy, if I can put it that way. So there's a sense of loss of identity and a yearning for all of these, a yearning to go back in time to the periwinkle days, as they say. So I think nostalgia works like a balm to the restless and anxious mind of mine. And yes, this book talks about memories of home. Our earliest memories of home are, often connected to our childhood. Home, as we know, is a place defined by memories, contents, and people as much as it is by physical form. It is an evolving idea that continues to change as memories and inhabitants come and go. So I believe that our memories, both good and bad, shape the person that we are today. And without these personal memories, we would be totally different people. They are the foundations we grow on. And as I mentioned about the recurrent, sense of place in many of my, writings. Place is more than geographic area as it is, more, to do with the host of associations. I think poetry has the potential to kind of express the emotional responses that a particular place can elicit. It is the positive bonds of comfort, safety, and well-being provoked by place, home, and dwelling that we want to relive through our memory. And the complete sensory experience of inhabiting that space, and how the domestic interior and as well as the exterior shape the acts of introspection and perception, all of these. So this is about my book, and I'll read a poem. It's a long poem, so perhaps I'll read only one. This is called Desiring Simplicity. Tonight, my thoughts linger in the intricate folds of extravagant days, where distraction bears heavy eyelids. It flutters its wings, yearning to escape the confines. The night, too, sighs with the chime of the grandfather clock, as time fragments within the bygone's embrace. My heart delves into the profound depths of night sighs, half-finished tasks, half-formed PowerPoint slides, emails left incomplete, a half-filled timesheet stares back at me, while an espresso cup echoes with emptiness. And I, too, feel incomplete. A sudden breeze teases my senses, transporting me to rustic moments. A metaphorical time machine, perhaps? The scent of damp cattail reeds, women weaving baskets, the young shepherd tending his flock, finding respite under the kadamb tree. Dusk gathering by the Koshi River because I hail from Bihar. So yes, swing ropes hanging from mango tree branches, the narrow dirt road bordering blooming mustard fields. Within the hourglass curves of narrow lanes, time trickles through jagged years. A scarecrow guarding the bounteous chest of the paddy field, the scarecrow more daunting than crows, as women form serpentine queues to fill their earthen pitchers, their anklets, silencing the crickets. A time when we beheld the world with pure wonder. Insects, birds, the rhyme of rain, the fragrance of jasmine, all filled us with awe. When the sun's golden chalice, weary from his journey, rested against the horizon's shoulder, shadows enveloped the trees. That's when Mother blew the conch. Summoning us to evening prayers, and we rushed home. In those days, Grandpa's yellow postcards held the greatest enchantments. I waited eagerly until they ceased to arrive. Now youth has waned. I no longer discern elephants in the clouds or saviors in the stars. Torn eyelashes no longer grant wishes, and I no longer wish upon shooting stars. I'm blinded by the city's chaos. Caught in an eternal shuffle within this concrete jungle, a whirlwind of errands, a never-ending race, no respite from this relentless rat race. My heart longs. For a voyage back in time to days of innocent bliss and lavish twilight affairs. I muse upon this shade of nostalgia's hue. I contemplate the palette of a morrow's skyline. I ponder what endures when the candle's flame wanes. Thank you so very much, Boshudhara. once again.
Thank you, Mahua. That was a wonderful discussion, both of the theme of these poems and also of the theme of hope, homelessness, and inhabiting in general. Thank you very much, and we will come back for another round of discussion on your book. Uh, from Mahua, we move over to Momita. Is Momita back again? I think she's losing her signal. She was here, but I don't see her. So while Bhumata rejoins us again, I think we will go ahead and invite Preetinicha. So Preetinicha is joining us all the way from Shillong. She's an academic, she's a poet, and she's here to celebrate her wonderful book with us, which is called it's got a beautiful cover, My Body, floating with hyacinths, and the cover is brilliant. So much lavender and green contrasted with one another. And these poems again speak about her very lovely hometown where she lives. There are poems on family. There are poems that talk about the various cultural traditions of her place. And with all of these, I would like to invite Preetinicha to talk about her book and also to read out poems from it. Preeti, over to you.
Thank you so much, Vasudhara, for giving me this platform, and a very good evening to all of you. At the same time, I thank Divyajyoti for publishing my book, My Body Floating with Hyacinths. As the title goes, it's what I feel about myself. I always felt that my body somehow floats with the hyacinths. Now, this collection is divided into 4 sections. The first section is You May Not Believe My Story. The poems of this section are about memory and nostalgia, a lost home remembered, and a home we wish to return to. I live in Shillong, but basically I'm from Assam. So the poems in this section are connotations of this experience. The first poem is My Old Story. One day I will tell you my old story, and the ghost of my giant ancestors would leap up the ancient well. You will hear the evening prayers of my great grandmother emerge from the dilapidated temple, harmonizing with the medley of the thunderous drum, the forceful cymbals, and the high pitched conch. You would wonder how these half made carvings in the passages which border the half asleep walls of the abashed mansion. Gushing up through the pages of my stories, they would all stare at you and your lustrous novelty. You may not believe my story, for you do not believe in ghosts. But if you visit the narrowing scraps of our yard, you will see the marks of a vanished well and a crumbled cattle shed. The neighboring night jasmine tree still carries its ancient fragrance. Another poem is called The Tale of a Yard. I wake up and sleep and wake up again. Blue curtains surround the room and shadow my essence. My face under the white ceiling looks like a copper plate, humid reddish brown. This is the moment when the mind goes for a sleepwalk to the rumbling field of sandy grass, tickled by the ripples of yellow brown leaves. The sun shines bright in the land of the waking sleep, and I fall asleep under the heat. Clutching the wire, the semi-dry clothes flutter in the wind. The ducks dive into the pond with quacking speed. The cows and the sheep slip into the front yard through the gaps of bamboo fence. The sky purples, the giant brass bell of the temple cautions the beasts, and the sleeping woman lying in the twilight. I move and wake up, and thus continues my sleepwalk through the dream of a forlorn yard I long to return. The second section is called We Had Emerged Out of Chaos. Now, this section contains poems of love, passion, and also confusion in love. I will read A Dream of Youth. When we meet, we will fly together, caressing each other with our enthralling beaks. We will sing the half-elapsed song. Tweeter, tweeter, tweeter. We will territorialize the sky, colonize our spheres. Our whizzing would form thunder. We will bathe in the rainbow, suck the evening twilight, soar down to nestle in the unfamiliar nest of opportunity. We will mouth each other's adventure. We'll giggle at the half-solved mysteries, look at each other through the gaps of dialogues. We will meet and melt into wine, plunge into deep tranquility, dissolve our bodies into illusions that would paint us anew with vibrant colors. You and I would be young again to nourish youth inside our feathers. Another, play love. Each time we make love, I ask you to call out my name. For you, it's a chant, a hymn. You reside in an ascending tone on the path of attaining the moksha stage of erotica. For my skeptic mind, it's an assurance of fidelity. I look at your meditating countenance, peer at the corners of your closed eyes to figure out at least a glimpse of promiscuity. Each night, the cat in me turns to a bat and looks at things upside down, brooding, drooling venom of suspicion and envy. Then the bat turns to a cat, licks its limbs to clean up the scars, the red-black patches, tasseled by the smarmy pieces of a fragmented dream. The next section, Let the River Narrate Her Own Tale, is about the self and its surroundings, which could get revealed only through imagery. So I will read a poem from this section called Red. Eagles soaring, swooping, surround my thought. A tight, limpid grip clot my essence into a ball of amour. Sky stares, stars freeze. Sharp-eyed Amazons clot my dreams, and I dream of red. An eagle flies alone. My eagles, red-eyed, red-wombed, charge in convocation, flinging heart flakes of late euphoria. The last section is called My Body Floating with Hyacinths. From here, I will read Cycle. It's about the everyday life that I live. Sweat drains my body as if a waterfall, eroding the red soil of a naked hill. Pungent, slimy, the quashy liquid drips. Clay perseverance, oozing out fatigue. A body leaned over cushions, a mind swinging in between, alertness and forgetfulness plunged together in me. Is it a drowning that leads to resurrection, or a cycle of everyday life? The last poem that I'm going to read is about my own poems. It's called My Poems. I hatched you one by one with full-timed patience. You came out one by one at intervals. I called you my poems. Now you are quacking here and there, paddling in puddles. You, all of you, have turned into ugly ducklings. So I marooned you to an island. When you were gone, I quacked to call you back, my ugly ducklings. You are not going to dive in cans of milk and transform into swans. You would rather grow into ugly ducks. Though ugly, you would quack and carry on my quacking farther and farther. Thank you.
Thank you, Preeti, for those wonderful poems. Jaideep sir is here Jaideep sir is actually traveling. And though most of the time he's traveling, I'm excited about his travels this time because he's traveling to Jamshedpur. So, uh, Jaideep sir, if you can hear us and if you can talk to us, would you like to
Yeah,
welcome
just now I
me?
could join because
Yes,
it's
yes,
so
I
sorry.
understood.
It's a very hard time on the train journey, bumpy journey here. Okay, but wonderful, wonderful poetry and poets here. Looking forward.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So thank you, Preeti, for those very lovely poems. And I think all of us enjoyed the last one the most. And we want to, confront you with the statement that these are not ugly ducklings. They will indeed grow up, and they have grown up, into beautiful swans. So thank you, and we'll come back again after. So Momita has, dropped us a message on Facebook that she's unable to connect because she's in her village and there's no signal there. So in case she turns up, we will have her into the discussion at any time that she manages to come in. Otherwise, it seems as if she may not be here. So I would like to go over to Sreetanwi, who is joining us from Kolkata. Sreetanwi is an academic. She teaches English at MIT University. She's also an editor, an anthologist, uh, and we are very happy that Sreetanvi is here to celebrate with us her new book. And this book is very, very interestingly titled. Sreetanvi, you will have to throw some light upon the title. The book says it's titled Medusa Says It All. So, as a feminist, we probably understand what Medusa says, but more importantly than Medusa, it is Sreetanvi's poems that say it all. So, Sreetanvi, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jadip sir. Thank you, Voshudhara, the Hearth Within. And of course, I express my heartfelt thanks to Red River and Dibbajyoti Sharma for making this book possible. This is Medusa Says It All, as I said, a book that is very close to heart. Now, uh, while teaching, of course, since we were talking about English literature, we all know there is the reference to Medusa in Greek mythology. We find Gorgon Medusa. One thing that we know about Gorgon Medusa, among other things, Medusa was the only mortal Gorgon and she was killed. So we know Medusa for her locks, we know Medusa for her sight, the eyes and the steel eyes, and whoever looked at her eyes was turned into stone. So somehow the character of Medusa seemed to be very appealing to me with all the, the kind of power, the kind of embodiment of power, embodiment of beauty. It was a kind of আমরা যেরকম ভয়ঙ্কর সৌন্দর্য বলি, it was surreal, it was real, it was not normal, it was outstandingly abhorrent or too much beautiful. I don't know, maybe I am not exactly finding the word, but Medusa remains someone who is mysterious, and I try to give in my poems all those small reminiscences from everyday life where women characters are there in my poems, and it can be a mother, it can be a simple amulet seller. I have written this poem, I'm going to read about this. An amulet seller in a local train, she perhaps is the Medusa. When she dies, her face resembles that of Medusa. She dies on the railway track. And so Medusa is everywhere. It's about that power, it's about that unseen prowess that is seen in a woman. It's the fountainhead of journey, and it's like, that full force, those primal forces. Somehow I'm actually reminded of Coleridge, where in Kubla Khan, the woman wails for her, the demon lover, the woman is wailing for him. And so somehow it's about those primal forces in my Medusa as a painting, Medusa as the amulet seller in a local train, Medusa as someone who is maybe just in the diurnal momentum of life, who is rediscovering herself. As the two parts of this book, they are divided. One is into the woman on the other side of the river, the woman who lost her husband and how she was relegated to the background by the society. And once she could turn men into stone. So this is again her story, where she is, in the a way that she is not anymore centralized. She is in the peripheral character. So there are peripheral characters where I have brought these characters to the forefront. And while making this book, I had a major discussion with Simin and also with Dibbajyoti, like what was the idea behind bringing this out. Some surreal visions are there. I have also tried to take up stream of consciousness technique at points, automatic form of writing at points maybe. And this just happened, all those everyday faces that keep on recurring while I'm writing. It can be it can be my mother in the hospital. I have written a poem on that. It can be my own self in the mirror. It can be a painting, it can be a sculpture. It is Medusa, I mean, in every small details. Perhaps we don't even look at those faces that can turn people into stone. But I really feel somehow that Medusas do exist, and it's not in a very negative form I'm saying, but it's a very violent reservoir of energy that is yet to be discovered. It's an unfathomable abyss maybe of energy, and the primal female force, the activity of that primal female force, where I find the strength within is deeply intact. And I think that. So that was the background to why I named this Medusa Says It All. So these are all our poems. My poem, it can be the amulet seller's poem, it can be the sculptor, the beheaded lady's poem, it can be someone who drowns into the river, her poem, the lover and the lady love. So anyone who can be Medusa who is retelling her story, or from that peripheral perspective, who never wanted to get centralized. So that is what my primary concern was, from, if you say, a post-colonial narrative, or I will not name it, but rather I won't sound too academic or boring, but the thing is that these primal and peripheral forces were into the vicinity while I started my thinking process, and this happened. So this is a very brief background. I mean, I never thought, the most difficult part is perhaps saying something about my own poems. So so I would, if you permit, I'll just read. Yes, the first part of the book is called The Woman on the Other Side of the River. So there is one poem called Edifices of Shadow. Edifices of shadow stood long on the drenched highways, some long ones visible on flaky plains, and a few short ones on the parched highlands. Serrated, cropped shadows jostled for love. Bigot shadows remained in one crooked corner of the mountain, unmasking the hidden skin of the peaks. Some shadowy patches were marching in a straight line, with placards in their mutilated hands, placards that spoke of blood-stained stoves and umbilical cords, exhausted daughters, and wives with husky voices who disappeared and never returned. Amidst this shadowed tapestry, the last edifices found solace under the enduring branches of the Amaratva tree. Here they sorted cards from a myth-laden city scavenger's sack. This is one. Second is the amulet seller in the local train. Before I say, I would like to thank many people, my faculty members, some of my colleagues, many of my students, many of my poet friends have joined. So I want to thank them all. Thank you for encouraging me in this way. Mritika, Ruchira, all my students who have joined.
Thank you, thank you. The Hearth
Yes.
Within is equally grateful.
Yes,
that we
thank you
have
so
such
much
a
that you
lovely
joined the
audience for
session.
poetry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The amulet seller in the local train. This is the other poem. The amulet seller comes from a diseased village with charms, oracles, concoctions, and magic mushrooms that could not save her clan. The last summer drought is on her face, crisscross lines of barren earth, dry, freckled, with dead lilies decking the skin pores. She sells stone and glass rings with divine numbers. Her feisty coiled hair flows in scattered direction as the train takes the commuters to a spectral destination. The silver box amulets have octagonal patterns inscribed with letters for pregnant wives, or swords and hilts that hinted at men's bravery. The amulet seller never quarrels for a window seat in the local train. Her fate is tied to the crossword puzzle in the newspaper the lean old man next to her reads. Nobody sees fear, no more longing in her eyes that could once turn men into tombstones. One January morning, the amulet seller's frozen body lay on the foggy fish plates, with a tattered woolen muffler covering the nape of her neck, her tangled hair with promises to be kept. Hawkers and daily passengers fidgeted with time. One by one, they examined the plaques, tubes, vials, and glass amulets in her bag, till the railwaymen came and carried the dead woman with a decrepit face and a steady, unflinching gaze that could once turn men into tombstones. The other poem, The Woman on the Other Side of the River. The belligerent woman lived on the other side of the river, with rusty bolts that never kept her home safe. She was the strongest harvester in the cornfield, and sometimes unbuckled the ends of an empty day in the local brick kiln, or she embossed floral patterns on graveyard stones. Her husband died 10 years back. People feared her dark brown eyes that turned men into stones. Every year, during the month of Choitro, she became the muse of the snake charmer, swinging her delicate waist to the tunes of the broken flute he played. She often looked at the brass bowl where she kept her betel leaves, till the virulent monsoon ravaged her bowl of dumbfounded dreams. Rivers dried into trickles in scorching summer, grains were poisoned, brick kilns churned out fumes of tar and blood. The woman on the other side of the river gazed and gazed, but nobody was alive to be turned into stone. Can I read one more or one or two more? Okay. Okay. This poem is called "How Are You Afros?" This is from the second part of the book. All my life, I grew up wanting. How are you afros? In the sickening cacophony of the twice dwelled seclusion of your life, do you still find the last few drops of Chimera's blood underneath the aerodrome? The smell of the blissful coriander soil claimed all humans in the autumnal harvest shared equal rights. Do you still smell air that had an aura of peppermint clove kisses of mine? Afros, how are you? Do you see the gilded horse-drawn carriage that bemoans the fantastic fate of the futile fairy hovering over Victoria's memorial in Calcutta? It was the shell-shocked city, rigorous in Naxalite pain. You were an indomitable activist. Does your pocket contain the bombshell manifesto of relentless love? Afros, can you still hear the pulsating organ under the bralette? Love it was Afros, love it remains, in the cloistered embraces beneath the tattered tarmac of the body. I look at the day's transition, sun-dried afternoons. I see mothers decorating framed photos of their dead sons with sandalwood droplets. They no longer mourn, bellow in pain, or let out heart-wrenching cry for the departed. Afros, do you hear? And one last poem, that is, when my mother was hospitalized, I wrote this on that day. Uh, um, Maybe I'm not finding it right now, so I'll read another one, Street Buses, and then we can just go to the next part. Yes, sorry. Yes, this poem is called Street Buses. Street buses ran helter-skelter from one end of the road to another, carrying naked sadhus with ash-smeared foreheads, twitching their eyes to see, passengers holding heart-shaped bus hand straps, waiting for the deliverer in the driving seat to take the buses to the festive city of skulls. Buses were decorated with old wedding cards that fathers crunched when their daughters became dead goldfishes in the village culverts. Street buses went a long way in search of rotund passengers playing dice with pumpkin cubes. The bus doors were ajar. The conductors hollered at rescued widows with ruptured abdomen membranes. They huddled at the vacant seats. Buses moved on. They crossed the bipolar river, crossed Yama's courtyard with his footprints painted in acrylic. Buses were full now, with blindfolded, silent passengers scratching blisters on their palm, unbuckling missed daggers to bring the bus to a screeching halt. Thank you.
Thank you, Sreetanvi. Those were wonderful poems and very lovingly read.
Thank you.
I will come back to you for questions, and while we move back to Atreyee, and Atreyee, I have a question for you. So, you titled your book, you've called it The Book of Blue. And while Krishna, as you point out, and as I, as a reader, discern, is a prominent trope here, I think blue also, is a contrast to the kind of violence that your poems deal with. So you are recurrently talking about violence. There are images, even in the poems that you read out, there's the image of cannonball, there's gunfire, there's also the violence of death, there's the violence of the entire, medical establishment, there's the violence of unrequited, sometimes unrecognized emotions. So I think that the idea of blue is also a kind of consolation to this sense of violence. It parallels, the sense of violence. So this is just, what I feel as a reader, and I would like to ask you to, talk about this. What was your idea in calling it the Book of Blue, and how does blue, kind of form a background to all these poems that you have brought together?
Actually, the title came from an editorial suggestion, and then I jumped at it because it captured the poem so beautifully. So it didn't initially come from me, although I was very happy with that suggestion. Yeah, I mean the Krishna reference in the title is quite obvious, but beyond that, there is an undercurrent of pain, I think, which is pain associated with the condition of modernity, where say we're talking about people getting up in the morning and just going about their business, just as the purple line moves into the universe. That kind of pain with which people turn away from attending to the register of the unique or the singular, and they kind of go about their business as usual lives, and that pain then gets amplified when there is a pandemic, or there's the love poem was written, that the gunfire poem that you're referring to was written during the Delhi riots of 2019. And all of these things get amplified, the pain gets amplified through these kinds of spectacular events. But the spectacular events are not really what the poems are about. The spectacular events hold that pain. They kind of vessels that hold that pain. I think that there is a certain kind of loneliness, alienation, and kind of deep misery of the condition of postmodernity that undercuts all of the poems. And within that, sometimes some pain kind of rises its ugly head into kind of Hydra-like, into a form of spectacular violence. Yeah, I think so. I'll stop there. Thanks. Thanks so much.
You are right. And I also find this, where the collapse of geography comes in. So it is as if, the entire world gets transformed into one stage. And, wherever you are, the condition remains the same. So whether you call that the postmodernist condition, you call that essential alienation, So that is very visible, there's a very theatrical effect in your poems that I observe, and that theatrical effect manages to demolish geography, because you repeatedly point to places, and then you point to places and you nullify those places. You don't set up those places as backgrounds to your work. So except probably, I think, the Radha Krishna temple in Vrindavan, uh, there's also a picture of it, Radhe Radhe, on the walls. So I think that is one of those poems where the poem is set in place. So the poem does not move out of that space of Vrindavan. Whereas in all other poems, I find that you are setting up and demolishing the idea of place altogether. So would you like to say something on that?
Yeah. So I guess it emerges from my own kind of unmoored existence, where I've lived in many places, and now it's hard for me to say what is exactly home. So I was listening with great care to Sreetanwi's and Mahua's poems, which have this notion of placidness very centrally in their poems, and mine are approaching non-place, if I can call it that. And non-place becomes a place with which to write poems, or a narrative device with which to write poems. A non-place is not a non-geographic, it's just many places together. One, as you point out. Two, it's a place which is often a conveyor belt. It's like, the kind of conveyor belts you see in airports, that kind of existence where you're constantly on the move, and that you don't get the time or the opportunity to pick up on the placidness of a place. And so Bangalore moves into eternity, but we don't know. I don't know, and I can't say honestly in my poems what Bangalore is. I love the city very much. I live here, but but I live almost as an expat, and I'm an expat in several other cities in which I've lived. And Calcutta, funnily enough, I was listening with great care to Sreetanwi's last poem, and Calcutta, where I grew up, doesn't feature at all in my poems, because I feel like I've moved so much that sense of home has been kind of effectively erased. I mean, that's partly biographical. That's where I am located, and that's where the poems come from, that kind of non-place. But partly where space spirals into time. So Bangalore moves into eternity means that it's a vessel which contains time for a moment, but it quickly kind of escalates into a infinitesimal time. And that's been an attempt in some of the poems, especially the poems which are about restless and still, the latter two sections. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Atreyee. And yes, indeed. So when that is why I emphasize the idea of poets also talking about their works, not just critics analyzing them, because it does add levels of meaning. And also you have an opportunity to see whether, poetic intention gets translated into poetic craft. So when you say that, we realize that your intention does get translated into craft, and we see what you want to show us. So congratulations, that's an accomplishment. Thank you very much. And we move over to Mahua. So Mahua, I was, when I was looking at your poems, and also when I was listening to what you had to say about your past and about how memories converge, when I went through your poems, there are, of course, many, many happy memories that you look back to, but there are also a lot of painful memories that, you evoke, memories of separation, memories of loss. So what is the process because most of these poems, I understand, they come to you as acts of catharsis. They are cathartic acts because they are very autobiographical, because you do not make any attempt to set up a screen between, the writing self and the speaking self in the poem. So the writer per se is the speaker in these poems. So because, there is that very clear-cut transparency, that autobiographical transparency, how do you deal with these, these painful memories in poetry?
As you very rightly said that, yes, poetry is, especially this book of mine, talks, it is cathartic. While writing the poems, I never thought that I'll publish the poem someday. I, wrote the poems because I wanted to, because I never thought that I'll have a reader to read my poems, so to say, And yeah, that's about it. And especially when I, shared the poems with Divyajyoti, he came to me with the title Nostalgia, Crafting a Home Within. And I leaped out of joy because I really like that exactly what my entire, poetry, I mean, all the poems talk about. It is about nostalgia. It is about how nostalgia creates a home deep within us. And it has been taken from one of my prose pieces in the book that, talks about how olfactory organ, the sense of smell, I believe all these senses take us back to a particular time and place. So this particular, title, takes us, talks about prose that talks is picked from a prose that talks about a sense of smell. And I'm truly grateful again to the Divyajyoti for helping me out with it. And I feel that the rhizomatic concept of nostalgia that this book is essentially about is a sentimentality of the past, and typically for a period or place with happy personal associations that crafts a feeling of home within us, if I can put it that way. And by home I mean the soul, not the soil. Home is not only a concrete place, but a state of being as well. And it is both objective and subjective, a physical structure and a set of emotional consortium. And to me, all these poems, and especially to me, nostalgia per se, is like a mother and a child both. And as I said, I had to part with my biological parents at a very tender age, and I was raised with another set of parents. So the memory that I have until I was 8 or 9, they hold a kind of very special place inside of me. And so nostalgia is like a mother and a child both, omnipresent in my consciousness. It feels like a mother as it renders me the warmth and the comfort of my mother's lap from time to time that I miss immensely. Love to go back in time and relive those, memories from time to time. And it gives me a sojourn from life's pandemonium. And it's also like my naughty child who, kind of hugs me in a tight embrace and convinces me to become a child like her as I relive my childhood memories and kind of bask in the glory of those beautiful days that are, dimmed with years many a times, and that reminds me, Tom Kane says that nostalgia is a powerful emotional force. And yeah, very rightly so. And I forgot your question, Boshu. What was your question? What
So
was your
you are
question?
answering my question very, you are answering it in a way. But I
Okay.
was also trying to ask you how you deal with this idea of pain, although you have already pointed that
Yeah.
out, the
So
mother-child
I
relation.
said, yes, writing is cathartic, and I always write. I never thought, that, in fact, even now I write for myself. That's what I feel. I never write because I should have an audience, I should have a reader, and how he or she perceives my writer. Writing is cathartic to me. It gives me that, calm comfort as my mother's lap, as I just said. And as I was talking to you about, I was telling you about this particular prose, which I really want to talk about, from which the title has been taken. It's interesting because, as I said, our senses are amazing repository of memory, particularly smell. And smell is potent and immediate, and it holds memory very sharply, I believe. For example, one whiff of the fragrant chuli, parijat flower, and I'm instantly, transported to another realm, another time and place, flooded by childhood memories of my grandfather's garden in Bihar, then Durga Puja and collecting shuli with my siblings to make garlands for the idols, the Ashtami Pujo, Pushpanjali, so on and so forth. So we experience the world around us first and foremost through our senses of smell. The only fully developed sense fetus has in the womb is the ability to smell. And I believe this has to do with, again, evolutionary development. And this is about how we smell smoke before the fire, right? And there's a science behind it, of course, but I'm not going to go into that. And this reminds me of, the French novelist Marcel Proust, when he described a similar experience in his book, I think Towards Swan, in which the smell of cake made the protagonist feel a cascade of, calm and forget about the predicaments of adult life. So on that note, I would like to just read a bit of my prose in bits and pieces, of course, because it's a very long one, to just give you an idea of how the sense of smell makes us go back in time. Yeah. Can I? So this is called Echoes of Childhood Fragrance. Sometimes I find myself lost in a reverie, a wistful journey to bid farewell to my childhood, which met an untimely end. In this mental landscape, I envision my youthful self, my dark brown ponytail cascading down my back, shimmering like polished mahogany. My eyes, once mirrors of that glossy shine, now bear somber weight, a hint of enigma, cloaked in resignation, yet infused with a spirit of defiance. Within this landscape, an iridescent shadow blankets the tranquil ruins of my past. I wander. I wander, much like a beggar, timid and lost, seeking arms of my childhood. My countenance bears an eerie silence as I witness myself running, arms outstretched, yearning for one last fervent touch, the touch of those periwinkle-hued days. This touch carries with it scent, soft and delicate, earthy, and all-encompassing. Nostalgia. Nostalgia seeps through the cracks of my heart, crafting a home within. In these moments, I need not rehearse my brightest smile. Instead, an involuntary grin dances upon my lips, accompanied by pearls of tears. I feel the warm embrace of these emotions on my bare skin within my soul, my memory intricately intertwined with my olfactory senses. Certain evenings, in particular, carry a profound aroma, a scent that resonates with home. My sense of smell becomes a swift vessel, transporting me effortlessly to my childhood days. I recall the local stores that line the narrow lanes of my hometown, nestled in a rustic embrace, their air carrying the fragrance of dust and time. There's the grocer who sold, among other things, imli ki chutney, sealed in tiny transparent packets. A piquant smell that still triggers my senses to this day. Fondly, we remember Munna Dada's shop, the neighborhood snack haven, with its tantalizing samosas and jalebis. Every time I passed by, I inhaled deeply, savoring the sweet and fried scents of his wares. Then there's Baiju Dada's grocery shop, where orders were taken one at a time, meticulously noted on ruled paper with a pen refill tucked behind his ear. I still wonder why he never used an actual pen. Occasionally, his daughter, a graceful teenager, would appear behind the counter, conversing flawlessly in Maithili. The shop exuded the unmistakable aroma of jaggery, a scent still vivid in my mind as I pen these words. The fragrance of the lychee tree in our backyard and the mango tree known as Langra Aam, the scent of unripe mangoes knocked down by an optimistic wind on an eager bird's pecking, the aroma of our feet soaked from puddle hunting for the treasure we called tikola, the unripe mangoes, the fragrance of the earth during Kal Boishakhi storms, and the peculiar scent of festive air that teased our senses, the heady aroma of shuli fool as we gathered them during Durga Puja, the captivating smell of the guava tree that bore pink guavas, fascinating my 4-year-old self. the lingering memory of fledgling birds in our garden, the gentle pull of the Koshi River in our heartstrings, the smell of Baba's pan, the smell of Baba's pan, and the comforting fragrance of Ma's embrace. The unique soothing scent, the smoky aroma of my Didanma, my granny's sari, as she prepared various sweets from Lobongo Lotika to Shor Bhaja on an earthen stove. Sometimes she bore the fragrance of a favorite perfume mingled with a hint of light perspiration. Mostly, she smelled of pure love and warm hugs. She smelled of love-soaked evenings as we crooned to her favorite Robindra Sangeet. Above all, I remember the quintessential smell of home. Everything seems to have distinctive scent, the smell that emanates from that old shinduk, the aluminium tin, lying in solitude in our attic, a sanctuary for precious mementos. I must confess, even at the risk of sounding peculiar, that I adore this old scent. It evokes memories of my most cherished dreams, the smell of the blue rubber ball I used to play pitto with, the scent of those old books in our home library, which never fails to ignite a nostalgic spark within my chest. The fragrance of lazy childhood summer days spent immersed in my favorite storybooks. Some scents connect us deeply to those we once loved profoundly and continue to hold dear. I have felt an ineffable poignancy when I realized that my grandmother was once young, doing all the things young peoples do. I'll end here because it's really a very long one. I just wanted to, talk about how smell takes us back to the bygone. I think you're muted.
Thank you very much, Mahua. That was quite a cataloging of the olfactory senses. Thank you so much. And from Mahua, we move over to Preetinicha. Preetinicha, I have been meaning to ask you, this particular title of your collection, Body Floating with the Hyacinth, it reminds me very powerfully of both Ophelia and Virginia Woolf, the idea of water, the idea of floating, and yet somehow I feel that your poems are not as, as bucolic as the hyacinth suggests. So there is something which is, implicit there, something which is a little, disturbing beneath the surface, in the way that your poems quack, the kind of, the sound effect that the word quack has, something which is a little jarring. So, do you at all, or did you at all think of this idea, or is this kind of idea there somewhere in the background of these poems?
All right. Now, the title is My Body Floating with Hyacinths, and it was suggested actually by Divyajyoti. There were 4 titles that he had suggested, and I had picked up this one. And I was really mesmerized how it is my body floating with hyacinths, because I had always felt that, as I have said, that my body was somehow floating with the hyacinths. Now, then, when I asked Divyajyoti, he also said that out of these 4, he also liked this particular title. And then I was elated that somehow Divyajyoti now knows me. So that's what I felt at that moment. And someone knowing me, my inside, is something that I really feel grateful to, because though people call me extrovert, I don't know how far of me they understand. And then he told me that this is, in fact, a phrase that is taken from one of my poems. I was not aware of that at that moment, though I have written those poems. But then when I looked again, then I found that yes, this is from one of my poems. Now, this hyacinth, as you have said, that this might have some connotations. It's from my old landscape, the landscape that I belong to. As I told that I'm originally from Assam. So in my place, that is Gauripur, is a small town, and then it's surrounded by lakes. So we have lakes, and in those lakes we have hyacinth. And I'm very much familiar with the imagery of hyacinths and then something floating with the hyacinths in the water. So that had always resonated and it was inside me. And the poems that we have in these collections are just reflections of myself, how I felt, how had I grown up. And it's also about the land that I miss so much because I'm in Shillong now. As I told that the first part is about my old home. We had an ancestral place where I had grown up till I was 12 years old. Then we moved to another house that my father had built. So something had narrowed. And then again, when I was married at the age of 23, I moved to another house. During my studies also, I was outside home and then I was married. Then I had to leave that home also because I followed my husband to Tura. Then I was in Assam civil service. So I came back to Assam, but to another place I was posted, not in my hometown. So memories of that place, Gwalpara, are also there within me. And then again, I joined my husband. After 3 years, I left the job. I joined my husband at Shillong. And since then, I have been living here. But though I live here, somehow or the other, I have carried my home within me. So that is there. Maybe there is a sense of loss that I feel, a kind of memory and nostalgia that make me express those through my poems. So if you have read, as you have said, you have read all my poems, you will see there are imagery that are taken from landscape directly. Those are raw imagery. And then there are fields, there are rivers, there are trails, and then there are poems of love. And it's not just about the passion of love, it's also about the suffering of love and also the confusions. Always, it may not be sufferings, but then there are confusions when we are in love or we feel love. So those are there. There are poems of suspicion as well. Then in the third section, I have some poems that just present some images without giving any overt meaning. So those poems I have kept like those. I mean, as they are, only images fill those poems. And then through the images, maybe one can find what I wanted to mean through those poems.
Thank you. Yes, indeed. Your poems are filled with plenty of nature images and very pristine in their own way. So there are green fields and there are, pools and there are rivers. Also, I think this would be a kind of, it showcases the land and the nature, the benevolence of nature in the Northeast. But at the same time, it talks about, as you mentioned, the suffering or the suspicions of love. I find those poems to be very, very powerful in their own way because they talk about love from a specific woman's angle. So I believe that most women would tend to experience love in that way. So thank you. So I was not very wrong, probably, in reading Ophelia or Virginia, who find themselves, because that could be a metaphor, the body floating. And so the sense of dissociation where you both identify with, but at the same time are alienated from the landscape that you are a part of. Thank you, Preetinicha, for throwing light on that. And so we come to Sreetanwi. And Sreetanwi, I have been thinking, I find it's the same link between Preetinicha and your poetry, that I find a lot of nature images in your poems also. And I see that you have, specifically taken up the agenda of bringing out the native names of trees or flowers, the local flora, fauna. There's an extensive documentation of the local flora and fauna of Bengal. So was that deliberate? Because when you were talking about, your poems, and you mentioned the idea of the post-colonial. So was that at the back of your mind when you were paying attention? In almost every poem, I come across some new tree, I could come across some new plant, some new flower. So this documentation of the local, which is there in much of your poetry, is that deliberate or it just happened by chance?
I won't say this was much deliberate. In fact, this you can say, well, it's a flow, it just happened, of course. But, for the first part, I would like to mention, since I was dealing with Medusa, the first part of the book is about all those poems that deal with mythological tropes and associations. There are instances of that, and I have tried to you know this put this entire indigenous perspective also in context, since I was talking about the peripheries. In one poem, I talk about, the red oleander, the roktokorobi, as we say, and then also omoltash and the water hyacinth. There is a poem that I have, and two lovers who die on a moonlit night, and they drown themselves into the water, and the water hyacinth is an evidence to that. So as I told, these peripheral morphosyl junctions are very common in my poem. Whether it's the woman standing at the border, or on the fringes, or the local train commuters, or the passengers who commute to office under a broad daylight. It was a kind of very apocalyptic vision sometimes, if I may say so. And also at the same time, there was this concept of finding this Medusa in, as I told you, this everyday surrounding, the words that I hear, the flowers that I see, the kind of poems that have reared me, the kind of instances that I have heard from my own parents, my own grandparents, my in-laws, and their experiences of land and labor and migration, and the kind of kantatar, the barbed wire, in which I put afros as a kind of figure, love story, afros, aerodrome, and the barbed wire. And also there is another poem. So yes, I think these are part of my makeup. I mean, while I was reading, while I read Bengali texts and also English ones, and not very deliberate, but definitely I found a kind of very swift conjunction when I am actually taking these words, and maybe a kind of experimentation also. And my publisher allowed me to do so. So I'm thankful to the Bojoti for this. And we had major discussions regarding this, but I wanted to keep this indigenous tropes intact, so as to deliver a kind of message where they will remain as it is. I did not want to translate some of the things. Yes, of course it was
Also, yes,
swift.
Sreetanvi. Also, I noticed that much of your poetry is, or many of your poems are located in very transitory spaces. So, when I was talking to Atreyee, I was telling her that there's a kind of, where she sets up and then demolishes the concept of place. So you can identify a location and immediately you are alienated from it, because that is projected into the wide idea of placelessness or non-place, as Atreyee pointed out. So when I read your poems, I find that they are set in very, very transitory spaces. So you just read out a poem called Street Buses, and then there's the railway station, or there's a transitory by chance encounter. So these very, very transitory spaces, I think they add to the effect of the bizarre or the surreal that you want to evoke, the sense of apocalypse. So was that also, does this setting also contribute to your vision of what you are exploring in these poems?
Yes, absolutely so. Because I still believe that it's a very liminal stage in poetry and also in feminist poetry. These interstitial spaces are very important to me, what I'm seeing through them. Not just teaching in class, but also while I write, I find that, my God, these spaces are so full of, they are not at all empty. They are not at all, they are so full of new stories, new moments that are interwoven into the larger tapestry, as I told. And many people, most often we don't see them. So for me, these interstitial spaces are very important, and we are constantly, I think all of us, especially for the women, I can say this transitory state is very constant. And while I'm writing, while I'm experiencing, while I'm daydreaming, while I'm having a nightmare, while I'm making love or whatever, I mean, in the crudest sense of the term, as much as I can say, or as a poet is saying, I mean, this is just like, a kind of enigma that beckons in terms of poetry. This is also something, it's a kind of frantic search for something. And it's not about that. I never talk about junctions. If you have actually read street buses, or if you notice the amulet seller in the local train, somehow the poems, they keep up opening new spaces, and new stories are woven. What happens, it's very, I keep them dangling at that particular point of time, very transitory, and yet remaining, um all those, the mortal frameworks that remain, and also yet telling the stories of Medusa, myth, reality, surrealism, all of them, they somehow coalesce in that transitory state. I find that it's very, like, as I told you, my mother, when she is wrapped in a sheet in a hospital, I become a fish. I wrote that poem. So I become a fish, and the poem was called Claustrophobia. If you really have time, I'll just take 2 minutes or 3 minutes to read that poem, maybe. So I think that you are right, because we all live somehow in that interstitial space. Every story that is woven, every story that is retold in my way, your way, Medusa's way, amulet seller's way, she can become Sreetanwi, Sreetanwi can become the amulet seller. So I don't know, maybe it's a kind of very abnormal, frantic search that I keep on doing.
Yes, Shritan, we would love to have you conclude with that poem.
Yes, I'm reading this poem. This poem is called Claustrophobia. That morning, when my mother was enveloped in the blue gray sheet of the hospital bed, I became a fish, a slippery fish flapping the maroon red fins inside a bucket full of trauma. The water of trauma, my veiled gas bladder, spleen, and ovary, deranged by the potholes filled with congealed blood on mother's arms. I was still a fish, a soddy, scaly, hoary puppet of time. Mother's hand embalmed with the bitterness of nostalgia, creating riddles in the groan of her midday sun. Her hands became the ladle with which she fed me payasam on my birthday. Her hair became the conch shell evening of Puri, when dainty dusk dawdled into the caves of Konark, splashing the tinctured sunbeams on the frothy banks of Chandrabhaga. I was a jocund fish now, turning and tossing into the bosom of the night with a pounding hammer, specks of sawdust on my nostrils, while I yawed and rolled into the water, my shallow fins juggling inside the bucket, in love with claustrophobia, until I stopped breathing in the refrigerator. I was unaware the morning swan swaddled my mother back to life.
Thank you. That is a very powerful poem, and also one of the favorite poems from that collection for me. Thank you. Uh,
Thank you, dear.
we have had a very interesting discussion, and there are many members in the audience. If anybody would like to make a comment, observation, say something, you're welcome. Anybody here who would like to, comment on the session? Shabnam, yes, I would like to invite you, of course.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Thank you. Um, Poets are often being dismissed as a kind of deranged minority, but I think we prove time and time again that we are a minority with great range, actually. Over the years of consuming poetry, I have learned to discern between verbiage and poetry, and I often found less is more. What I found today movingly so, was poetry as verb, actually. A verb in an ongoing ecological dialogue, and a discovery that song itself is a kind of being. Each of you conveyed that beautifully. I'd like to make individual comments on the poets very humbly. Pardon me if I mispronounce your names. Atreyee, you were so powerful in revealing the messy culpability of being human, and that very dynamic homeostasis that you brought out that happens in the interface between the self and the environment. The way you did it with the raging artistic tension, that's what makes your poem so resonant. Mahua, I loved, there was a sort of subatomic cellular feel to the grain of your rhythm. You know, your link with some kind of an ancient past was moving to me. The way you brought out the self as a kind of constellation, lovely. And also you made absence a place. You made absence a home. I was rather emotional to receive that from you. And Preeti, pardon me, Preeti, is that okay if I call you Preeti?
Fine.
Your poems were a love song to loss, I thought. You gave a sort of corporality to emotion, also very moving. And Miss Chakraborty, I loved your embodied cognition of, of women, Medusa. There was sort of a wild kinship that you created with her. And there was a dissonant yet sonorous musicality to all the iterations of self that you conveyed. And ultimately, I think the glue that binds all these poems is the force that is Vasudhara. I think with Vasudhara, there is this honest grappling, with either wanting to take refuge from your own externality, to wonder, is the poet an evolutionarily maladaptive creature? I think she and I sometimes bond in that space. What I learned from Vasudhara is that things are so much greater than the names we give them. And I would end there, actually, just in homage to her. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Shabnam, for adding your beautiful, beautiful words to the session. And I'm sure all our poets appreciate, because
Thank you so
poetry
much.
does not make sense unless it arrives at a good reader. It is a reader which adds layers of meanings to the poem. And I think poetry falls flat. I have said this before also, and I say this again, that prose may be conveyed by word of mouth, you can tell the essence of a story, and then that can go on and on, but you cannot convey the essence of a poem unless it is heard, unless it is registered this way, in the way that it has today. And we are very grateful for technology, that we can conquer geography and have you all the way from the US and see you like this. Thank you so much. Oindri has raised her hand. Oindrila Bhattacharya, please, we would love to have you unmute. If you want to switch on your video, we'd love to see you, and we'd love to hear what you have to say. Yes, Oindrila, please.
Thank you so much. I should apologize that I missed out on most of you, actually, because I was a bit late to join the session, and was fortunate enough to hear it out from Sreetanwi Chakraborty. Just
Thanks
one
for joining. This is like she is my classmate from Calcutta University, and still now we are together. Thank you,
Yeah,
Indila.
Thank you so much. One just small observation actually, I just found that, Medusa, you have just used the thing from Greek mythology, and very interestingly, because there are feminist undertones over there, and you're speaking about and for women who are actually decentralized and have been moved to the periphery. Somehow it resembles, if I'm not wrong, especially we're also in CU, and there was very much this in this chapter called Things Fall Apart from African Literature. And there also, interestingly, I found a sisterhood where Atreyee has spoken about women, moving away from center, rather forced to move away from the center to the peripheries. Interestingly enough, these women apparently may seem to be powerless, but actually it is found that the entire village he has depicted, actually has depicted the entire Igbo village of Umuofia being ruled by the oracles and the caves, which is headed by Agbala. Interestingly, in Igbo, Agbala means women, and the main assistant to Agbala is Chielo, again a widow with two children, again decentralized. And somehow I find, whether it's Chielo or Agbala, it's obviously representing a different culture. It's not Eurocentric, it's absolutely, we studied as a post-colonial text. In spite of that, somehow Chielo and Agbala, they also represent Medusa. When I come across Sreetanwi's Medusa Speaks, the speech of all the Medusas put together, somehow I find that there is this thing going on, whether it is the West or the East, whether it is the Occident or the Orient, the contexts are same. So that is my observation basically. So thank you for the lovely session once again. And yeah, that is me.
Thank you. Thank you for the lovely observation, Soendrella. Thank you for
Thank you,
joining
Indira.
also.
Thank you.
And especially because Sreetanwi says that you are her friend. So that kind of reinstates one's faith in poetry, one's faith in friendship. Thank you for being here for your friend. And this brings us to the conclusion of a very, very beautiful session. We were supposed to have 5 poets. Mohammed Alam, she writes from West Bengal. She's a poet, activist. And it would have been lovely to add her voice to this session, but unfortunately she could not join us for technical issues. She's traveling and there's no net at her end. But we are very grateful that we could have this interesting session with 4 poets, and I think these 4 poets, in a way, they speak to one another. So I distinctly find a kind of connection between Mahua's and Preetinicha's poetry, and another kind of connection between Atreyee's and Sreetanwi's poetry, where, these 2 poems, they talk about place-edness, and these 2 poets, I think, they talk about, they question the idea of place. In their own ways, they are questioning. What brings all these 4 poets together is, of course, the very strong vision. I would not call it a feminist vision for all of them, but yes, there is this woman's vision, animating the poems, a woman's experience of place, a woman's experience of love, a woman's experience of the idea of placelessness, the idea of everyday monotony, the way the monotony is experienced within home and out of home. I think that forms a very interesting collage. And when we talk about the variety that the titles bring in, the variety of geographies. So especially when I, read all these 4 books, 5 books rather, I was drawn to the idea of the body, which is very central to all these poems. So you have body distinctly appearing, I think, even in Atreyee's poetry, with the Book of Blue. The blue came across to me as the blue of Krishna, as the blue of the body. And you have that distinctly in Preetinicha's poetry, where she talks about the body floating in the hyacinth. And then you have Mahua, who talks about nostalgia, which also stems, from the loss of the body in place. And Sreetanwi, of course, is bringing in the body in various dimensions. The mythological body, I think, she brings forward to us. She brings the myth into the everyday, and she also takes the everyday into the world of myths. So all these 4 very, very distinct voices should go a long way in poetry, also in the understanding of contemporary realizations of womanhood. We are very grateful that Red River brought out these 4 powerful books, and that this session, could also happen because of the graciousness of Divyajyoti and also all these 4 poets who consented to be here. Thank you very much. I wish your books a very, very happy, powerful, empowering journey as they move ahead. And with this, we come to the end. We'll very shortly put this up on YouTube so that you can share it with friends, and also you can go back to it when you want to cherish memories of today. Thank you very much, everybody. And
Thank you,
Shabnam,
thank you.
thank you.
Thank you so
Special
much.
thank you to everyone who has joined here. It's always good to have more people share in this love for poetry. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.